Hello, my name is Lynn Walden and welcome to my channel. I'm going to be doing a reading for the sun sign of Cancer for the week of November 25th, 2024. I'm using my Intuitive Insight Oracle cards as a focal point. And I have to say, this is probably one of the clearest, most direct readings I've done so far. Cancers, you are being asked to check in with your patterns, especially around responsibility. Now, I like to look at responsibility the way it's defined in A Course in Miracles, and they look at it as the ability to respond. The thing with cancers, and I speak of it having a Cancer rising, so being quite familiar with that energy, is there is a tendency for them to not feel like they have an ability to respond differently. They very often have a lot of past events, and a lot of it's programmed in childhood, where they feel that their job or their function and their very value comes from taking care of other people. The problem with that, well, there are so many, like how can we talk about them in 10 minutes? The thing about having that as a cornerstone for your identity is that very often then it overrides you being able to actually know what's important to you, what your feelings are. Everything gets hijacked by everybody else's feelings. Part of that is because Cancer is a very, very sensitive sign and often very empathic. So sometimes the taking care of other people is not just about being loved, being accepted. It's about trying to nip any conflict in the bud so that you don't have to deal with the stressors of it and pick up on everybody else's issues and problems. And if you're coming from a background where there's been a lot of chaos in the family, or even if you've been dealing with a lot of trauma yourself because of your perception of things in the family, because of your sensitive nature, it can really create a pattern of taking care of other people at your own expense. But then what tends to happen, is as you go on in life, and this becomes a pattern of giving and taking care of, there is an instinctive tendency to expect to get that care and that consideration back. And quite often it doesn't happen. And it's challenging because then that can really breed a lot of resentment. If you're at that point of it breeding resentment, then that's usually when you look at it. You may not be there yet. But if you find yourself in a pattern constantly of being there for other people, even if it's not to a point of resentment right now, but if you're constantly being there for other people, what you're being asked to do is take this week as an opportunity to really change things up, change your patterns. Now, this may sound really simplistic, but you might have identified a pattern of always looking out for the other person emotionally. Not necessarily talking about your issues, but listening to theirs, and not necessarily with one person, but with a bunch of people. It's a very Cancerian thing to do. You may not be able to change that right away, but what you can start doing is exercising your choice muscle and start changing different things, smaller things that seem less challenging. So change the pattern of the coffee or the tea that you drink, where you eat your breakfast, the direction you sit when you do something. If you constantly find yourself eating at exactly the right time or relying on always the same foods, experiment a little bit, change some of that. If you're used to sitting at your desk or cooking your lunch at home, if you can and it's not unreasonable for you, take a chance, go out for lunch. Take your lunch, eat on a bench. Of course, always safety, all of that stuff. But just simple things that you can start changing, because that in itself starts bringing the energy of change. into your field and into your mind, and then you start looking at things differently. So you're being asked to really do that. In conjunction to that, you're really being asked, it's interesting here, because you've got two cards from two separate packs that are talking about faith and trust in a higher power, and as a process of building faith, to really look at it as something that is an internal process. And I like this. Faith develops as we move inwards into the deepening self-awareness and the understanding of our own spirit. The thing with the kind of behavior that's constantly taking care of other people, when it does not involve also truly taking care of ourselves, is however kind it is and however nice it is, it's still very often locked into the personality and not into a higher conscious mind, because those patterns that we've created around that very often are about survival in some way. So this is asking you to trust that there's a higher power. Higher power is coming up a lot this week. To move inward, to take stock of what your patterns are and how much time you spend in your mind in the past, in the present, and in the future, and where it feels good and where it doesn't feel good. You might notice as you're reflecting on these things that these behaviors started early because you had a sick parent or an absent parent, or you were the oldest and you needed to take care of the younger ones. It might have been spoken, it might have been expected, it might have been something you assumed on your own because you thought it was expected. Take a look at those things and notice, how much time do you spend in the present? Because in the present is where you can get in touch with yourself, where you can really be aware of who you are. You can get in touch with that inner spirit, and you can ask questions of yourself. I feel it's really important that you do that, and that you look at what's going on with your childhood here, where some of these behaviors have come up. It seems like a good week for that. Who says why not? This is something that I think really speaks to what I've just said. It may be something that you have assumed. It may have been something as assumed as a role. It may have been something, these whatever patterns you're dealing with, whether they're caretaking or not, whatever patterns you're dealing with, I should clarify that. Look at where they came from. Go back in your childhood. Look at that. Who said you had to do that? Did anybody, or was it something that you just assumed? And if so, why did you assume it? Is it because it's something you like about yourself, or is there something else you can look at now? Because very often when we've come from that pattern, when we've got a very well-developed pattern that we have taken on from childhood, whether, again, it's assumed or whether or not it's put upon us. If it's something that we have been validated for doing, it can be sometimes the only thing we end up liking ourselves for. That's really sad. And it's not the truth, because there's always so much more, always so much more. So you're being asked also to take stock of yourself. What do you like about you? What are you proud of? What have you done beyond that pattern that supports you in seeing yourself differently? And it doesn't have to be humongous. You don't have to have, a PhD in genetic engineering. You might just really like the way you laugh, or the fact that you've got a great sense of humor. You might like the shape of your eyebrows. Bring anything up that validates you as an individual, something that you can feel proud of, that is not based on the old patterns. Okay? So as a recap, you're being asked to look at your own patterns, generally around responsibility. However, for some of you, it may be something different than that. Look back at your childhood. Who told you that that was valuable, or who modeled that for you, or what did you witness in something that made you think that was that was the truth, and question it. Question it now. Check in with what you like about yourself. Take stock of that. Really own that. Change up your behaviors around any of these patterns that you identify that you can do safely. And really understand that this is a journey of self-discovery for you this week, letting patterns go that are no longer serving you. Being able to identify things about you that are valuable beyond those patterns, and to have faith in understanding that you have a spirit that is far stronger than any entrenched personality issue that you've got going on, which is holding you back. That is it, my dear Cancerians. I hope this is helpful. I think this could be a really, really wonderful week for you. And check out staying in the present. If your patterns are pulling you into a behavior from the past, or if you're constantly basing what you do on concerns about future possibilities if you don't maintain that pattern, then it's time to look at that. And that's a good thing to do. It's a good week to do that. Within here too, I would just like to say OCD patterns can be part of that too, that are not related to any specific person, or I shouldn't say person, but role towards another person, but patterns around anxiety developing into OCD. That can be something that might be coming up for you too. So just notice that might be an issue for you. Okay, that's it for now. Hope this was helpful. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon.